Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and many of you know that the one of the great problems in America right now is the problem of mass incarceration. That's probably the leading civil rights issue of our day. That's the issue that I've decided to spend my life fighting on. But I'm just one small soldier amongst many brilliant intellectuals who I'm not brilliant, but the guy on the line with me is brilliant. Individuals like Dr. Byron Price, who has spent his career on the front lines dealing with the prison problem, as well as just making sure that there's awareness and understanding of the effects of, say, private prisons versus public, etc. And I wanted to bring Dr. Price on the line to have a conversation. How are you doing today, Dr. Price?
I'm good, Dr. Watkins. How are you?
I'm doing really well, and I wanted to apologize to people in advance that there sounds like there's a little bit of a lag in our communication, but we'll make it work. I'll just not talk as much as I normally do because I know I yap too much. So, Dr. Price, now first of all, I want people to know where you're at, so that people have an idea of your background. You are at are you still at Medgar Evers College?
Yes, I'm still at Medgar Evers College in Brooklyn. It's a part of CUNY, City University of New York system.
Okay, and what is your position at Medgar Evers College?
I'm a professor of public policy and administration.
Okay. Now, today, recently, you had written an article that appeared in the Huffington Post. That also we talked about the article on culturecritic.com, where you actually pointed out that there was a study written by a couple of Temple University professors about private prisons, and these two professors, from what I understand, and I'll let you explain it because you can explain it better than me. These two professors wrote the study. They concluded that private prisons save money and that they're very efficient, etc. But they did not reveal the fact that the private prison industry was actually paying these professors to conduct this study. Can you tell us a little bit about the article that you wrote and you know where this kind of came from?
Yeah, so one of the things, Dr. Watkins, is kind of interesting, it's kind of fascinating about private prisons. They always talk about they're more efficient, they're more effective, they have better quality. But a lot of those studies that come out highlighting the superiority of private prisons are usually funded by the private corrections industry. So they fund these studies, and the only reason why the Temple University, they basically published the study in 2013, but finally someone called them on it that they didn't disclose that they were funded by sort of the private corrections industry. And now Temple University is basically, because of an ethics complaint has been lodged against the professors, they're investigating the professors, and now other scholars and other organizations have begun to investigate their research. And so what's very problematic about that is they had a year out there where people thought these were unbiased professors, and they were economic professors. And so you're a finance professor, you understand finances. Although a lot of us smart, but we're not as smart as you guys that do the economics and finance. You can really convince people using numbers. And they they omitted a lot of information, like private prisons don't house death row inmates. They don't house maximum security inmates. Now, public prisons house all kind of inmates. And so when you think about maximum security inmates, prisoners with HIV, prisoners with mental illnesses, they cost a lot. And so private prisons don't house those inmates. And so they make these comparisons. Of course, if you don't include those or factor in those costs, then of course you're cheaper. You can run cheaper prisons. You can run prisons cheaper. But a lot of times they manipulate and they pay people to say what they want. And this is not the first time. Now, back in the 80s, Professor Charles Thomas from the University of Florida actually received a $3 million worth of stock from Corrections Corporation of America to say that they reduced recidivism and to say that they were cheap and effective. So we're trying to call you're a scholar yourself, you're a professor. Because we have to call scholars that receive corporate funding on the carpet when they don't disclose that basically the industry that we're supposed to be sort of researching be unbiased, and research is supposed to be value-free. We have to disclose the fact when we receive funding from a funder. It's not necessarily that we cannot be unbiased when we do research, but when you don't disclose, then I think there's some that's problematic in my opinion.
Oh, it doesn't just sound problematic. It almost sounds borderline fraudulent. Again, I'm not going to say that that's exactly what it was, but that's certainly what it sounds like. If you look throughout history, you've seen cases where research were funded by, say, BP in the oil industry, and so when they study the oil spills, they always miraculously conclude that the oil spills didn't do as much damage as a lot of people know that they did. The tobacco industry, for many decades, was notorious for spending tens of millions of dollars giving money to professors to do research that just happened to conclude that cigarettes were not very harmful to you. So I think that it certainly harms the credibility, the academic integrity and credibility of Temple University. So I think that university, as well as any other that does not want this kind of embarrassment and humiliation, they need to investigate where their researchers are getting their money. And what's really disturbing about this finding that you present to us in this article, which people can read at either Huffington Post or culturecritic.com, is that this had real policy implications. This wasn't just a scholar in a lab writing a research paper that nobody's going to look at. This research was presented to political leaders and used as the foundation for their decisions and how they allocated taxpayer money. So you almost have to potentially argue that this is really a hair away from the same kind of fraud that gets people sent to prison for misallocating government resources. If I get a grant and I say I'm going to use that grant to build a recreation center for young children, and instead I use that money to build a strip club or to buy myself a new car, I'm going to go to jail for that. Now, I'm not saying that these scholars should go to jail for that or anything like that, because if they didn't break a law, then they didn't break a law. But at the same time, the damage seems to be not just equally bad, but even worse, because you're talking about changing people's lives. You're talking about taking people's money under a false pretense, really theft by deception almost. The only difference is that they didn't actually get to keep the government resources, but I'm sure that they got more funding from the private prison industry as a reward for producing the kind of work they want to see. Because let's be real. Corrections Corporation of America is not in the business of paying for research that is going to cost them money, right? That's not what they do. So now you mentioned in your article, which I just found so interesting and so well done, and I hope everybody reads it. You mentioned that people should support the Private Prison Information Act of 2013. Tell us a little bit about that. I don't know a whole lot about that particular act.
Well, see, here's the thing. The private prisons are subsidized by taxpayers. And so when we want to sort of ascertain information from private prisons, they fail to disclose it because they claim proprietary concerns. And so they have killed the Private Prisons Information Act since it was first introduced in 2005 because they're not concerned with transparency in the private prison industry. See, we researchers could probably help validate their claims if they would allow us to really actually take a look at whether or not they provide better quality, that they're more effective. But research demonstrates that they cut corners, okay? For the most part, the first thing they do is they cut labor costs. So they hire people with less qualifications because they pay less. And they try to use, like, security equipment to make up for the lack of, correctional officers. So they do a lot of things to cut corners, and they say they provide better quality, but it's like a lot of anecdotal information, Dr. Watkins, that they provide, and we can't go in and look at certain records. We can't look at whether or not they have any incidents in their prisons. Okay, so when you request that information, let's say if I was incarcerated and you wanted to get some information about even my medical records, I know there are some things that won't be disclosed, but there's some things that can be disclosed. Private prisons won't disclose any information, although they're receiving taxpayer funding. So when you're an agent of the government, so you should be subjected to freedom of information requests. But we can't get that kind of information to kind of make an analysis of whether or not how much they spend look at their per diems. I mean, when you think about transportation costs, when you think about sort of even when prisoners escape, who pays their costs? Usually the state winds up paying their costs. So we can't really look at what private prisons pay. And also a lot of private prisons have been used as an economic development tool. So a lot of them get infrastructure subsidies. They get tax abatements. They get all kinds of subsidies. So if we factor all these subsidies and tax abatements and tax breaks, and we look at how much it costs to sort of house prisoners if they're ill, if they have a disease, if they're mental illness, see, we can't even get at that kind of information. And so it would help us if we could get at that particular information, but they refuse to allow that act to pass. And we've attempted since 2005, and now it's 2014. So why are they afraid of transparency?
Well, I think we know why they're afraid of transparency. Transparency leads to accountability, and I don't think they certainly don't want to be held accountable for the atrocities that are occurring in many of these private prisons. There's literally one story after another and you could probably tell more than I could, stories of inmates being denied access to food, access to health care, being written up more so that their sentences will be made longer so that the prisons can make more money. It's really atrocious. It really is. It is slavery. I mean, it's not a form of slavery. It's not like slavery. It is slavery. And you and I know that according to the United States Constitution. It says slavery is abolished unless you are convicted of a felony. So, so what and I'll say this, Dr. Price, and I'd like to get your take on this. I was talking last night to a couple of individuals at the Rainbow Push convention, and we were talking about prisons, and one of the things that came up was someone was saying that there is a push to deal with the incarceration epidemic because it costs so much money. And I said, based on what I see, my limited analysis, as a person who is admittedly not an expert on this, but I am certainly an advocate on this, I guess. My limited analysis tells me, though, that private prisons, as you mentioned, are subsidized by the government right now. That's how they make their money. Taxpayers give the money. Politicians allocate the money. They give the contracts to the private prisons. I said, what you really have to worry about, I said, right now you got the Republicans supporting you because they want it. They're into this whole cost cutting thing. I said, but what you really have to worry about is that day where private prisons figure out how to run these institutions without any taxpayer money and still make a profit. Because if you are able to have somebody do work for 25 cents an hour on a $20 an hour job, and then you could sell that product at a higher price and get other corporations like the Nikes and all these other Starbucks and et cetera that are paying prisons to do labor, then a prison doesn't. Eventually, you can envision a prison that does not need taxpayer money. All they need are the politicians to send the inmates to them, and they put the inmates to work. Right? I mean, is this something that you've seen already happen? Something that you see could happen, or what do you think about that?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think what you have to take into consideration, a lot of states have prison industries. Okay, it's just not the private prisons exploiting inmate labor. States have prison industries, and the government created actually the first prison industry, Unicor. Okay, it was 1933, and they founded it. The U.S. government founded it so inmates could make furniture and a lot of other stuff for the U.S. government. Okay, so they have prison industry. So when you take into consideration the labor, but you talked about the per diem, but the private prisons get the per diem by the state, and then on top of that, they contract out the inmates' labor, and so they get billions of dollars from the labor, from these for the ladies, Victoria's Secret basically uses prison labor. Okay, you think about Dell Computer, TWA before it went out of business. So some of the prisons take your credit card information. So there are a lot of corporations that utilize prison labor. The only reason why it hasn't, because of the correctional unions. The unions, that means they would lose jobs. So the unions are basically really fighting, because if private prisons had their way, you're right with your point. You were very perceptive that they would basically be able to just exploit their labor and probably not even take taxpayer funding. But why would they do that, Dr. Watkins, when they know their friend? I used to be in the government, so I'm your friend. You own a prison, so I'm gonna give you this per diem, and then somewhere down the line, then you're gonna pay it back to me. Here's an example. President Obama appointed, I can't remember the lady's name. She's the U.S. Marshal, current U.S. Marshal. Well, she used to get contracts for the GEO Group before she became over the U.S. Marshal. She got millions of dollars of contracts from the GEO Group. So, what do you think is the largest, fastest growing sector of privatization? Federal privatization. Okay, so it's not surprising. So they are exploiting that inmate labor. And here's another thing that we should do, that we should take up. I think inmates should receive a fair wage. They should receive minimum wage, because a lot of them have child support arrears. Okay, so why can't you work all day, 40 hours a week? Why can't your money go to pay for child support arrears? Okay, so why can't your funding go to put up some money for yourself when you come out? They let you leave with $35. Why can't you put away money for yourself? Now the phone companies basically cut deals with states where states get 84% of the profits, and a payphone in the prison makes $15,000 a day. So they're making money hand over foot or hand over foot. I think that's the thing. So they're making all this money, but the inmates, I know they're saying, well, they need to pay for their stay. Okay, that's fine. So they could pay for their stay, but there still has to be some money left for their families. And so when they leave out, if you've been in locked up 20 years, well, hey, if I put up $40, $50 every time I get paid, I can have me a nice that next day when I come out after 25 years, right?
But you know what? In our society, you don't deserve to have a nest egg because you are a felon. You don't deserve to take care of your family because you are a felon. You don't deserve to do anything for anybody that you care about because you are a felon. You don't deserve to work ever again because you are a felon. You don't deserve to be protected from prison rape because you're a felon. You don't deserve basic human rights because you are a felon. Because the government has labeled you as a felon, even if you are a nonviolent offender who did something that a lot of people get away with every day, possessed a little marijuana, which is making white boys rich all over the country, you don't deserve the basics of any type of decency or opportunity because you are a felon, and that is what we are as a society.
I think you should qualify it. If you are a felon of color, it's applicable to you. I don't think it's applicable to white felons. And Devon Pager, in her study, The Mark of a Criminal Record, demonstrated that a white felon could get a job before you and I. And I think you all had a study that you put on your website about black graduates, white grad felons, and so forth. You put it out on your website. So, no, if you're white and you're a felon, no, you can be reintegrated back into society. It's just when you're a black or minority felon, then you have this lifetime sentence.
That's right. That's absolutely correct. And I think that it's up to people like yourself to keep fighting on this issue. I know I'm gonna fight alongside you. I want people to know a lot more about your work than mine because I lean on your work. I lean on your expertise to help me understand the best way to support. And so I think that everything you're doing is great. You're one of the lead people on this issue. In fact, when I'm looking to really talk about what's going on with prisons, I got you and Michelle Alexander in my phone, but actually I call you first, and I text Michelle every now and then, but because I respect her. But you're at the top of my list in terms of people that I've just seen just doing amazing work over the years, and I commend you for that, and I think Medgar Evers is very lucky to have you. So thank you for all your expertise, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Absolutely, and thank you all for checking us out from Your Black World. We had some interesting computer difficulties about 5 minutes ago, so I don't know if your screen froze up or not, but either way, I was hearing the audio, so I hope that you were too. So please, share this information with everybody you know. Understand that that the new Jim Crow is something that we have to fight against. It's destroying families, destroying communities. It doesn't mean people don't deserve to go to prison. Doesn't mean people don't deserve to be punished. What it means is that the punishment must fit the crime. And right now, the punishment is entirely disproportionate to the crime. And so we're not seeking a free ride. All we're seeking is justice. So, so join this fight with us. We really need you. Until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. We are gone. Peace.